My name is Emily Parker. I'm 39 years old. And this is the story of the Christmas where my in-laws tried to shove me into the corner only for me to hand out envelopes that changed everything. I've always believed holidays were supposed to bring families together. Growing up, Christmas meant noisy laughter, carols in the kitchen, and long nights playing board games while my father stoked the fire. But marrying into the Parker family had shown me a very different version of Christmas. One where appearances mattered more than love, where money was flaunted, and where I, the outsider, was treated like a tolerated inconvenience. Daniel, my husband, was kind and steady, but when it came to his family, he was quiet, too quiet. He never defended me when his mother, Margaret, made her cutting remarks. He didn't correct his sister Claudia when she mocked me. And though I knew he loved me, his silence sometimes hurt worse than their insults. The Parkers were wealthy, old money polished. Margaret, the matriarch, carried herself like royalty, and Claudia followed suit. Ryan, the youngest brother, was smug and arrogant, always bragging about his investments and belittling anyone who didn't measure up. Then there was Grace, Daniel's cousin, the only one who ever treated me kindly. She was warm, empathetic, and often caught in the crossfire, quietly reminding me that not all Parkers were the same. Every Christmas, we gathered at Margaret's sprawling estate. It was a house straight out of a magazine grand staircase, glittering chandeliers, a dining room that could seat 20. And every Christmas, I was reminded that, to them, I didn't belong. I remembered my first Parker Christmas, years ago. Margaret had fussed over Daniel endlessly, praising his career, his charm, his choice of suit. Then she turned to me, looked me up and down, and said, "At least he married someone quiet. A loud wife would have been a disaster." The words stung, but I smiled politely. That was the start of many such comments. Claudia once told me my dress looked quaint, like something from a thrift store. Ryan laughed when I brought a homemade pie, calling it rustic in the most condescending tone possible. Every year, the message was clear. I wasn't one of them. And Daniel? He would squeeze my hand under the table, murmur, "Ignore them," but never spoke up. I told myself it was because he didn't want to ruin Christmas, but part of me longed for him to choose me over their approval. As this year's Christmas approached, I dreaded it. My stomach twisted at the thought of walking into that mansion again, of plastering on a smile while being chipped away piece by piece. The week before, I tried to talk to Daniel. "Do we really have to go this year?" I asked gently as we wrapped gifts in the living room. He sighed, rubbing his forehead. "Emily, you know my mother expects us. It would cause a scene if we didn't." I bit my lip. But every year, they treat me like I don't exist. Or worse, like I'm in the way. He put down the ribbon, taking my hand. "I know, and I'm sorry, but maybe this year will be different." I wanted to believe him, but deep down, I knew better. On Christmas morning, we drove through falling snow to Margaret's estate. The driveway was lined with expensive cars, Claudia's shiny SUV, Ryan's flashy sports car. I adjusted my scarf, taking a deep breath as we walked up the grand steps. Margaret greeted us at the door, her pearls gleaming, her smile stiff. "Daniel, darling," she said, kissing his cheek before barely glancing at me. "Emily." A nod. That was all. Inside, the house was decorated to perfection. A massive tree towered in the living room, ornaments glistening under twinkling lights. The dining table sparkled with silverware and crystal glasses. Laughter echoed from the other rooms, but it wasn't the kind that warmed your heart. It was sharp, pointed, full of competition. As we entered the dining room, Claudia's eyes swept over me. "Emily," she said sweetly, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "What a simple dress." "Very understated," Ryan snickered. I smiled tightly, taking my seat. Or rather, the seat they gave me, always the farthest end of the table, near the wall, where I could be ignored. Every year, they placed me there, like a child at the kids' table, except this was worse. It wasn't about space. It was about sending a message. Grace caught my eye from across the table, offering a sympathetic smile. She mouthed, "I'm sorry." I nodded faintly. Dinner began with Margaret toasting her wonderful family, her glass raised high. She mentioned Daniel's promotion, Claudia's new house, Ryan's latest business deal. When she was done, she set her glass down and carried on, not even acknowledging me. I sat quietly, my food untouched. My chest tightened, but I swallowed the lump in my throat. I'd been through this before. I knew how it went. But something inside me was different this year. As I sat in that corner, listening to their laughter, their smug voices, and their deliberate exclusion, I realized I couldn't just endure it anymore. Not again. This year, I had something none of them knew about. Something I had prepared quietly, carefully, waiting for the right moment. And as I slipped my hand into my bag under the table, brushing against the stack of envelopes I had brought, I knew this Christmas dinner wasn't going to end the way they expected. The moment we stepped through Margaret Parker's front doors, I could feel the weight of judgment pressing down on me. The Parker estate was breathtaking, at least on the surface. Twinkling lights wrapped around the tall columns, garlands draped along the banisters, and the massive Christmas tree stood proudly in the center of the living room, glittering with gold ornaments. It was the kind of place that belonged on the cover of a holiday magazine, and yet, to me, it felt more like walking into a lion's den. Margaret swept forward to greet Daniel, her voice rich with pride. "Darling, you made it." "Oh, it wouldn't be Christmas without you." She kissed his cheek twice, patting his arm as if he were still a boy she could dote on. Then her eyes flicked to me. "Emily." A curt nod. That was all. I forced a polite smile. "Merry Christmas, Margaret." She didn't bother replying before turning back to Daniel. "I've seated you near me, of course." I couldn't imagine spending Christmas dinner without my son right by my side. I felt my stomach knot. Near her, which meant I would not be near him. From the hallway, Claudia's voice floated in. "Mother, are they here?" She entered dramatically, her red velvet dress hugging her figure, diamonds flashing at her neck. "Emily," she said, her lips curling into a smirk. "What a charming outfit." "Very modest." Ryan followed, dressed in an expensive suit despite it being just family dinner. "Hey, Daniel," he said, ignoring me entirely. Then he glanced at me, chuckling. "Did you knit that scarf yourself? Or find it at a garage sale?" Claudia giggled behind her hand. Daniel shifted uncomfortably but said nothing. Just nothing. I swallowed hard, keeping my smile in place. I'd learned long ago that reacting gave them more satisfaction than silence. Grace arrived then, offering me a warm hug. "Merry Christmas, Emily. You look beautiful." Relief washed over me at her kindness, though it was quickly drowned out by Margaret's voice calling from the dining room. "Everyone take your seats. Dinner is served." We filed into the grand dining room, the long table sparkling with polished silver, crystal glasses, and an elaborate centerpiece of poinsettias and candles. Margaret stood at the head of the table like a queen presiding over her court. "Daniel," she said firmly, gesturing to the seat at her right. "Sit here." Claudia slid gracefully into the chair beside him. Ryan took the next one. Grace was placed across from them, near the center. And me? Margaret pointed toward the farthest chair at the end, tucked awkwardly into the corner by the wall. "Emily, you'll sit there. It's more comfortable for you, I think." The words dripped with false sweetness, but everyone at the table knew what it meant. They weren't saving me a comfortable seat. They were pushing me out of sight. Claudia smirked as I made my way down the long stretch of the table. Ryan whispered something to her, and they both laughed. I sat down, adjusting my chair, the wall pressing close to my shoulder. From here, I could barely see Daniel, his profile just visible over the flowers in the centerpiece. He glanced at me once, guilt flickering in his eyes. But then Margaret began fussing over him, and he said nothing. As the meal began, Margaret raised her glass. "To family," she declared. "To our achievements this year, our blessings, and the bonds that make us strong." Everyone clinked glasses, except me. No one even noticed that I hadn't been given wine, only water. I sat quietly as they toasted Claudia's new house, Ryan's latest business deal, Daniel's promotion. They congratulated each other loudly, their voices filling the room. Not once did anyone look my way, let alone acknowledge me. Grace tried to include me in small ways, passing me dishes first, asking about my garden, but every time she did, Margaret redirected the conversation. "Oh, Emily's hobbies are sweet, but let's talk about Ryan's new condo," she said at one point, waving away Grace's attempt. I clenched my jaw, smiling politely. I was used to it. This wasn't new. But sitting at the very edge of the table, literally and figuratively pushed out, the sting felt sharper than ever. The final blow came when Claudia leaned across the table, her voice loud enough for everyone to hear. "Mother, isn't it so quaint how Emily never really contributes? I mean, we all bring something: business, success, investments. But Emily just sits quietly. It's almost like she's invisible." Laughter trickled around the table. Even Ryan snorted. Daniel stiffened but still didn't speak. My cheeks burned. Invisible. That's what I'd been to them all these years. Grace's face flushed with anger. "That's unfair, Claudia." But Claudia only sipped her wine, smiling smugly. "I'm just saying what everyone's thinking." I lowered my gaze to my plate, my hands trembling under the tablecloth. My chest felt tight, like the air itself was closing in. They had always dismissed me, always mocked me. But tonight, being shoved into the corner while they openly laughed at me, it was worse than ever. And yet, deep inside me, something stirred. Not shame, not despair, something stronger, because I knew something they didn't. And as my fingers brushed against the stack of envelopes hidden in my bag at my feet, I realized they had just set the stage for the moment I had been waiting for all year. Sitting at the end of that table, with laughter swirling around me like I didn't exist, I realized invisibility can feel louder than words. The clink of silverware and the low hum of conversation filled the dining room. From my corner, I had the perfect view of everyone else smiling, drinking, talking over each other with a kind of joy that excluded me completely. Claudia leaned into Daniel, her manicured hand brushing his sleeve as she whispered something that made him chuckle awkwardly. Ryan launched into another monologue about his latest brilliant investment, bragging that he had nearly doubled his portfolio this year. Margaret hung on his every word, nodding proudly. I sat quietly, cutting into my roast beef, though I had no appetite. Grace sent me little glances of encouragement, but even she couldn't shift the family's attention away from themselves. At one point, Margaret lifted her glass again. "A toast to my children," she said warmly. "Daniel, Claudia, Ryan, you've all done so well this year. I couldn't be prouder." Her words hung in the air, echoing down the length of the table until they reached me. My fork hovered mid-air, and I forced myself not to flinch. No mention of me. Not even a polite nod. Claudia smirked, catching my eye. "Oh, don't pout, Emily," she said loudly. "Mother just didn't want to embarrass you by pointing out how simple your life is compared to ours." Ryan chuckled. "Claudia, be nice. She keeps things interesting, like a little reminder of humility." More laughter followed. Margaret didn't intervene. Daniel shifted uncomfortably, his jaw tightening, but still, nothing. Grace finally spoke, her voice steady but edged with irritation. "Emily works harder than anyone I know. She just doesn't brag about it." Claudia rolled her eyes. "Oh, please, Grace. What exactly does she do that's so impressive? Bake pies? Grow flowers? Knit scarves? How quaint." My hands curled into fists under the tablecloth. Every year it was the same mockery disguised as humor, daggers wrapped in smiles. And every year, I bit my tongue and endured it. But tonight, the sting was sharper. Perhaps because of where I was sitting. The corner wasn't just a seat, it was a message. "You don't belong here. You're not one of us." I thought of my own childhood, Christmases, warmth, laughter, my mother pulling me into the kitchen to taste cookies straight from the oven. I thought of the joy I once felt at this holiday. And the contrast made my chest ache. Daniel finally spoke, his voice soft but strained. "Claudia, enough." She laughed, brushing it off. Relax, big brother, it's just a joke. Emily knows I don't mean it. But I knew she did. She always did. The conversation shifted back to Ryan's business. Deals, Claudia's designer purchases, Margaret's charity gala. They sipped wine, exchanged gifts, praised each other endlessly. From my corner, I might as well have been a piece of furniture. I tried to eat, but the food tasted like ashes. I tried to smile, but my face ached from holding it too long. My mind buzzed with a single thought. How much longer can I sit here? Grace leaned across discreetly and whispered, "You don't deserve this, Emily. Don't let them get away with it forever." Her words struck a chord deep inside me. She didn't know, couldn't know, that I wasn't planning to let them. Not tonight, not anymore. Just when I thought I might make it through the meal quietly, Claudia struck again. She turned to Margaret with a smirk. "Mother, don't you think Emily's lucky? She doesn't have to worry about contributing anything. She just sits there and smiles. A free ride, really." Laughter bubbled again, cruel and sharp. Something inside me snapped. My chest burned, my eyes stung, and for the first time in years, I didn't want to swallow the humiliation. I didn't speak, not yet. Instead, I slid my hand into my bag, feeling the weight of the envelopes I had prepared. Smooth paper, neatly sealed, my little secret. As Claudia sipped her wine smugly, completely unaware, I felt a calm wash over me. Because while they thought I was powerless, I knew the truth. While they treated me like I had nothing, I had something they couldn't imagine. And soon, they would see it. Because if they wanted to shove me into the corner, then that was fine, because corners give you the best angle to surprise everyone when you finally stand up. There comes a moment when silence stops being strength and starts being surrender, and I realized I'd been surrendering for far too long. The laughter from Claudia's jab still echoed in my ears as I pushed my fork around my plate. Roast beef, potatoes, gravy, all carefully prepared and beautifully plated, but I couldn't taste any of it. My stomach churned, my chest felt heavy, and I fought the urge to excuse myself from the table just to breathe. I stared down the long stretch of the table, watching them toast and congratulate each other as if I weren't there. Claudia flipped her hair, basking in Margaret's praise for her flawless holiday hosting at her new house. Ryan bragged about a deal he'd made that only someone with real vision could have pulled off. Margaret beamed at both of them, pride radiating from her like sunlight, except her light had never once been for me. Daniel sat stiffly beside his mother, his expression tight, his jaw clenched. He'd heard the jabs, the dismissals, the blatant cruelty. I could tell he hated it. But as always, he said nothing beyond his quiet, "Enough, Claudia." A whisper in a storm. And that was what broke me, more than Claudia's venom or Margaret's coldness. The silence. The endless silence from the one person who should have been my shield. I leaned back in my chair, feeling the wall behind me. The corner. Always the corner. Every year they sat me here, as if to remind me of my place. Not truly family. Not worthy of the middle seats, of the laughter, of the spotlight. My mind flickered back to my very first Parker Christmas, nearly 15 years ago. I had worn my best dress, clutching a small gift I'd carefully chosen for Margaret. She had thanked me with the kind of smile you give a stranger on the street before setting the box aside unopened. Later, Claudia had snickered to Ryan that my gift looked like something from a bargain store. I'd laughed weakly, brushing it off. But that night I cried quietly in the guest room while Daniel slept. Year after year, it was the same. Marginalized, overlooked, mocked. And I told myself to endure it because family mattered, because keeping peace mattered, because maybe one day they'd finally see me. But here I was, 15 years later, still in the corner, still invisible, still enduring. And I was done. My hand slipped into my bag again, brushing against the neat stack of envelopes. Each one held a piece of myself, a truth I'd carefully prepared. For months, I debated whether to bring them, whether tonight was the right night. But as I sat there, the sting of Claudia's words burning through me, I knew there was no going back. This was the night. Grace caught my eye again, her brow furrowed in worry. She gave me a small, encouraging nod, as if to say, You don't have to take this anymore. And she was right. I lifted my gaze, studying each face at the table. Margaret, regal and dismissive, sipping her wine as though her approval were the currency of the world. Claudia, smug and sharp-tongued, forever chasing her mother's praise. Ryan, arrogant and self-assured, certain of his superiority. Daniel, torn. Trapped between loyalty to his wife and fear of confronting his family. And Grace, the only one who had ever truly seen me. I felt the weight of the envelopes again, heavy with possibility. My heart pounded. But not with fear. With clarity. Because here's what they didn't know. While they spent years mocking me for being quiet, I had been building something. Quiet didn't mean weak. Quiet didn't mean passive. Quiet meant observing, learning, preparing. I had spent years running a business they barely acknowledged, dismissing it as a hobby. But that so-called hobby had grown into something substantial. Investments, savings, choices carefully made. I had worked in silence while they laughed, and now, that silence was about to roar. Claudia's voice cut through my thoughts. Honestly, Emily, she said loudly, swirling her wine. Don't you ever get bored, sitting there quietly while the rest of us actually have accomplishments to celebrate? The table chuckled. My hand tightened around my napkin, but for once I didn't shrink. I looked straight at Claudia, my voice calm but steady. No, I don't get bored, because I've been busy in ways you can't imagine. The laughter died instantly. Claudia blinked, startled. Margaret's head turned sharply, her brows knitting. Daniel froze. I slipped my hand fully into the bag, feeling the edges of the envelopes. My pulse thundered, but my voice didn't waver. In fact, I've brought something for everyone tonight, a little contribution. Margaret's eyes narrowed. Contribution? Claudia smirked. What is this? Handmade ornaments? Knitted socks? Ryan laughed. Oh, this should be good. I pulled out the stack of envelopes, setting them neatly on the table in front of me. Their laughter faltered at the sight of them identical, sealed, my handwriting on each. Grace's lips parted slightly in surprise, but she said nothing, watching intently. I'll let the envelopes speak for themselves, I said quietly, sliding the first one across the table. And as Claudia reached out with a mocking smile to open hers first, I felt the shift in the room, the first tremor before the earthquake. The envelopes lay on the polished table like silent bombs, waiting for someone brave or foolish enough to open the first one. The clink of silverware died down. The laughter vanished. Every eye at the table was fixed on the small, neat stack in front of me. Claudia reached forward with her perfectly manicured hand, her smirk sharp. Well, she drawled, since you're so eager to contribute, I suppose I'll be the first to see what this little surprise is. She slid her finger under the flap, tearing it open with exaggerated flair. Her smugness was so thick it coated the air. For a moment, I felt the old Emily stir inside me, the one who wanted to shrink, to take it back, to disappear. But I held my ground. Claudia pulled out a folded check. She glanced at it casually, expecting nothing of worth. Then, her eyes widened. Her smirk fell. The room held its breath. What is it? Ryan pressed, leaning forward. Claudia blinked, her voice cracking as she read the amount aloud. This is a check. For $50,000. The table erupted. Ryan laughed sharply. 50,000? That's a joke, right? Margaret's lips thinned, suspicion etched across her face. What are you playing at, Emily? I sat back in my corner seat, my voice calm. It's no game. That check is very real. Claudia stared down at it. Her disbelief painted across her face. This has to be some mistake. No mistake, I said evenly. You all think I've been sitting quietly for years doing nothing. But while you were busy mocking me, I built a business, a profitable one. I've invested. I've saved. And tonight, I decided it was time to share a little of what I've built. Silence swept across the table. Forks frozen midair, glasses untouched. Even Daniel looked at me like he was seeing me for the first time. Ryan snatched his envelope next, ripping it open with greedy hands. When he saw the check inside, his jaw dropped. "This one's for me too. Another 50,000. Grace looked stunned but smiled faintly, her eyes shining. "Emily," she whispered, shaking her head in awe. One by one, the envelopes passed around the table, each relative opening theirs, each gasp puncturing the silence. Identical checks, each one for $50,000, made out in my handwriting. Claudia's face flushed crimson. This can't be right. Where would you—" She cut herself off, glaring at me. "Where did you get this money?" Ryan leaned back, chuckling nervously. "Yeah, come on. Did you win the lottery or something?" Margaret's voice was cold, slicing through the noise. "Explain yourself, Emily. Now." I met her gaze evenly. For once, I didn't flinch under her stare. "I told you. I built something. A small idea that grew while you all thought I was wasting time. You mocked me for baking, for gardening, for not having a real career. What you didn't know is that those hobbies became the foundation of an online business. Sales, partnerships, investments. I worked in silence while you dismissed me." Their faces shifted shock, disbelief, even fear. Ryan snorted, trying to recover his arrogance. "An online business? Please. That's not real money." "Look at the checks again," I said coolly. "It's real." Grace spoke then, her voice filled with pride. "I knew you were talented, Emily, but I never realized the scope of what you were doing. This is incredible." I gave her a small smile. "Thank you, Grace." Claudia fanned herself with her check, still flustered. Why would you just hand this out? What's the point?" I leaned forward slightly, my voice calm but steady. "Because for years, you've treated me like I contribute nothing. Like I'm invisible. Tonight, I wanted to show you how wrong you were." The silence that followed was deafening. Daniel cleared his throat, his voice tentative. "Emily, I didn't know." I turned to him. "No, you didn't, and maybe that's because I stopped trying to make you see. But tonight isn't about just the money. It's about respect." Margaret's fingers tightened around her wineglass. Her voice was clipped. "Respect isn't something you buy with checks, Emily." I smiled faintly. "I agree. Which is why the checks come with conditions." Gasps rippled around the table. Ryan frowned. "Conditions? What kind of conditions?" I folded my hands neatly on the table. "Very simple ones. Respect. Basic kindness. Treat me like a member of this family instead of shoving me into corners. If you can't do that, I'll take the checks back right now." The air turned heavy, the weight of my words sinking into every corner of the room. Claudia gaped at me. Ryan muttered under his breath. Margaret's face hardened like stone. But Grace smiled. And Daniel, for the first time, looked ashamed. And as I sat there, the stack of envelopes now scattered across the table, I realized I had just shifted the balance of power and they weren't sure what to do with it. For years they'd told themselves I was small, unimportant, someone to push aside. But now, with those envelopes on the table, they were forced to see me and they didn't like what they saw. Claudia's hand shook slightly as she clutched the check. Her lips moved, but no words came out at first. Finally, she blurted, "Respect? You're blackmailing us for respect?" I leaned back in my chair, calm in a way I hadn't felt in years. "Not blackmail. A choice. You want to treat me like a shadow at this table? Fine. But shadows don't give gifts." Ryan laughed, but it was a hollow sound, edged with unease. "This is ridiculous. You think throwing money at us changes anything? Respect isn't bought with checks." I tilted my head. "Exactly. Which is why the checks are only a symbol. What I want isn't your gratitude, it's basic decency. Stop mocking me. Stop shoving me into the corner like I don't exist. Treat me like family, or don't take the money." Margaret finally spoke, her voice low and sharp. Where did this come from, Emily? No one just conjures up checks like these. What kind of game are you playing? I met her cold gaze without flinching. It's not a game. I've been building something quietly, steadily, for years. You called my work hobbies, but those hobbies turned into a business. I sell my baked goods and homemade crafts online. It grew. I partnered with small boutiques. I invested the profits wisely. That's where this came from. Hard work, persistence, and the belief that I could succeed, even when none of you believed in me. Grace's smile was wide, her eyes shimmering with pride. I knew it. I always knew there was more to what you were doing. This is incredible, Emily, Ryan scoffed. An online shop? Please. That's hardly. He stopped when Claudia hissed. Ryan. The checks are real. Daniel finally spoke up. His voice hesitant. Emily. Why didn't you tell me? I turned to him. My chest tight. Because I was tired of trying to make you hear me when your silence at this table told me everything. You were afraid of your family's judgment, so you never stood up for me. So I stood up for myself. His face flushed, shame flickering in his eyes. Margaret bristled. So you've been sitting on this little secret, waiting to parade it out at Christmas dinner? How manipulative. I shook my head. No, Margaret. What's manipulative is spending years tearing someone down, knowing they won't fight back. I've let you all believe I had nothing of value. Tonight, I decided to stop letting you believe that lie. The silence that followed was thick. Claudia fidgeted with her check, Ryan tapped his fingers against the table, and Margaret's expression hardened into something unreadable. Finally, Claudia burst out. So what, we have to bow down to you now? Pretend we like you to get money? I smiled faintly. You don't have to bow down, you don't even have to like me. But if you want to keep treating me like furniture in this family, don't expect me to give you a single cent. Grace clapped softly, breaking the tension. Well said, Emily. About time someone shook this family awake. Ryan glared at her. Oh, of course you'd take her side. You've always been soft. Grace's eyes flashed. No, Ryan. I've just always had a conscience. The room buzzed with tension. Daniel cleared his throat again, this time louder. Emily's right, he said, his voice steadier. I should have defended her all these years, I should have spoken up, and I won't stay silent anymore. That stunned them more than the checks. Margaret's lips parted, as though she couldn't believe her son had dared to oppose her. I exhaled slowly, relief flooding through me. For the first time, Daniel wasn't shrinking. He was standing beside me. Margaret's eyes darted between us. So this is your new game, turn my son against me with your money? Daniel shook his head firmly. No, Mother. She didn't need money to do that. She needed truth. And the truth is, you've treated her terribly. We've all seen it. And it ends now. The words hung in the air, heavier than anything I'd ever heard from him. Claudia shifted uncomfortably, her confidence cracking. Ryan muttered under his breath but didn't push further. Margaret's face was pale with fury, but she stayed silent. I let the quiet stretch, savoring the shift in power. For once, I wasn't the one shrinking. They were. And as I looked at their stunned faces, I realized this wasn't just about checks, it was about reclaiming the voice they had stolen from me, and they were finally hearing it loud and clear. And for once, I wasn't going to stay quiet. I was going to let the truth pour out, detail by detail. The table was frozen in stunned silence. Margaret's glass of wine sat untouched. Claudia's manicured nails tapped nervously against her check, and Ryan smirked like a man desperate to pretend he still had the upper hand. I folded my hands neatly in front of me. You all asked where this money came from. Let me tell you. I began calmly, recounting the story. How I had started small, selling baked goods and handcrafted holiday ornaments at local fairs, just to make a little side income. How, over time, I'd realized there was a hunger for quality homemade goods online. I opened a small online store, I explained. At first, I sold pies and cakes. Then I expanded into handmade decorations, personalized gifts, and seasonal items. People loved them. Word spread. Here, I had more orders than I could handle alone, so I hired 2 part-time helpers. And from there it grew. Grace's eyes sparkled with pride. That's incredible, Emily. But Ryan snorted, leaning back in his chair. So, what, you're an Etsy queen? That's your big secret? Please. 50,000 is pocket change in the real world. Claudia smirked in agreement, clearly relieved at Ryan's attempt to downplay me. Exactly. You probably just saved up little by little, and now you're waving it in our faces. I didn't flinch. I thought you might say that. Which is why I brought proof. I reached into my bag again, pulling out a slim folder. Inside were account summaries, investment reports, and proof of earnings. I slid them across the table. Margaret's eyes narrowed as Ryan snatched the folder first, flipping it open. His smirk faltered. His eyes scanned the numbers again and again, his lips parting slightly. What is it? Claudia demanded, leaning over his shoulder. Ryan tossed the folder toward her like it burned his hands. It's real. She's cleared over 7 figures in profits over the last 5 years. The gasp around the table was audible. Claudia fumbled with the folder, scanning the papers herself. Her face drained of color. Margaret's eyes locked on mine, sharp and searching. You've been hiding this? I tilted my head. Not hiding. Just not advertising. Because every time I tried to share something, you laughed. You dismissed me. So I kept my head down and let the results speak for themselves. Grace leaned forward, her voice strong. Do you all hear yourselves? You mocked Emily for years, made her feel invisible, and all the while she was building something extraordinary. And now, when faced with the truth, your first instinct is to tear her down again. Her words hit the table like a hammer. Daniel finally added his voice, his tone firmer than I'd ever heard it at one of these dinners. She's right. I've been guilty of staying silent. But not anymore. Emily has achieved more on her own than most of us at this table. And she deserves respect. Claudia crossed her arms tightly, glaring. So now we're all supposed to grovel because she wrote us checks? I met her glare evenly. No, Claudia, I don't want you to grovel. I don't want you to worship me. I want you to stop treating me like I'm less than you. That's all. Ryan muttered. This is insane. But even he couldn't summon his usual bravado. Margaret's voice cut through again, quieter this time but sharper than ever. So the conditions stand. Respect for money, that's what you're asking. I shook my head slowly. Respect for humanity. Money is only the mirror. If you can't look at me and see someone worthy of basic kindness without a check in your hand, then take nothing. Tear it up. Walk away. But if you want a chance to rebuild what you've broken, the choice is in front of you. For the first time, Margaret didn't have a cutting response ready. She stared at me, her pearls gleaming, her pride warring with something else, something like uncertainty. Grace's voice broke the silence. Emily, I'm proud of you. You've done what most people only dream of, and you did it while carrying the weight of their cruelty. That takes strength. My chest swelled, gratitude filling me. Grace's words weren't just support, they were validation, something I'd starved for in this family. I looked around the table at their stunned, uneasy faces. For years, they'd spoken over me, laughed at me, shoved me into corners. But not tonight. Tonight, my voice filled the room. And as I sat back, watching the truth sink into their silence, I knew the next words out of Margaret's mouth would either tear the family apart or change everything. The envelopes weren't about money, they were about drawing a line. And now it was time to make that line clear. I let the silence hang for a moment, the weight of the numbers, the checks, and the folder pressing down on the room. Then, slowly, I leaned forward and folded my hands. Let me be very clear, I said, my voice even. These checks are not payment. They're not charity. They're not bribes. They're gifts, gifts with boundaries. Claudia snorted, waving hers like a fan. Boundaries? Please. Just say it, strings attached. I met her glare head on. Yes, Claudia. Strings. Respect, kindness, basic decency. Things you should have given freely but never did. Ryan rolled his eyes. Oh, come on. You can't just dangle money over people's heads and demand they change their personalities. That's not how this works. Then, don't take the money, I said calmly. Simple as that. That shut him up for a moment. Margaret finally spoke, her tone sharp. And what exactly are these conditions? I looked her squarely in the eye. Stop mocking me. Stop treating me like I don't belong in this family. No more jokes at my expense. No more pushing me into corners. No more dismissing everything I do as meaningless. If you can manage to treat me with the same basic courtesy you give a stranger on the street, then keep the check. If not, give it back now. Gasps rippled across the table. Claudia's face turned crimson. You can't be serious. You think you can buy respect? That's pathetic. Grace cut in sharply. No, Claudia, what's pathetic is that it takes $50,000 for you to even consider treating Emily with dignity. The table went still. Claudia's mouth opened, but no words came out. For once, she had no snide comeback. Daniel cleared his throat, his voice low but firm. Emily's right. I should have stood up for her a long time ago. I stayed silent to keep the peace, but all that did was let this cruelty continue. No more. She deserves better. From all of us, and especially from me. My chest tightened, tears stinging my eyes, but I didn't let them fall. Daniel's words weren't loud, but they carried weight. For years, his silence had been a wound. Tonight, finally, he was stitching it closed. Margaret's eyes narrowed. Daniel, don't let her manipulate you. She's using this to drive a wedge in the family. Daniel turned to her, and for the first time in all our years together, his voice rose. No, Mother. You did that the moment you decided Emily wasn't good enough. She has done nothing but try to be part of this family, and you've treated her like an outsider every single year. This isn't about money, it's about respect. And she's right. It ends now. Claudia slammed her hand on the table. Unbelievable. So we all just bow down to Emily now? Is that the plan? She plays the victim for years, and suddenly she's some kind of hero because she waved a few checks in our faces? Grace's voice cut through, steady and sharp. Emily's not the victim here. She's the proof that quiet strength doesn't mean weakness. You mocked her while she built something incredible, and now you can't stand that she's stronger than you ever gave her credit for. Ryan muttered under his breath. This is insane. But the truth was plain in their faces. They were rattled, shaken. For the first time, I wasn't the one cornered they were. I leaned back in my chair, my voice calm but resolute. You don't have to like me. But if you want to stay in my life, if you want to stay in Daniel's life, then you will respect me. That's not negotiable. Take it or leave it. Margaret's lips tightened into a thin line. Her pride was a fortress. But even fortresses crack. Daniel reached over, sliding his hand into mine. His grip was firm, steady, protective in a way it had never been at this table before. He turned to face the family with me, not against me. And in that moment, something shifted. For years, I had been the outsider, the one shoved to the corner. But tonight, with Daniel beside me and the truth laid bare, I realized I had claimed my seat at the table, and nothing would take it away again. And as Margaret's face hardened and Claudia sputtered, I knew the next words they spoke would reveal whether they valued family or only control. For years I had been the silent guest at their table, but that night, my silence ended and theirs began. Margaret's wineglass trembled in her hand as she set it down with a sharp clink. Her eyes, hard as glass, swept over me before settling on Daniel. I don't care what little game she's playing. Emily will never be part of this family. Not truly. I've tolerated her, Daniel, because she's your wife. But don't think for 1 second she can buy her way into my good graces. The words struck like a slap, but I didn't flinch. Instead, I reached calmly for the check in front of her. Sliding it off the table, I folded it neatly into my bag. Gasps rippled down the table. Margaret's eyes widened. What do you think you're doing? I met her gaze steadily. You made your choice. You don't respect me, so you don't get to keep this. The air crackled with tension. Claudia leaned forward, her voice sharp. Oh, this is rich. You set us up, didn't you? Dangle the money. Wait for us to slip. Then snatch it back so you can play the victim. Grace slammed her fork down, her voice ringing out. Enough, Claudia. The only victim here is Emily, and you all made her 1 year after year. This is the first time she's standing up for herself, and you can't handle it, Ryan sneered, though his grip on his check was tight. So what, if we don't grovel, you'll just take them all back, is that it? I held his gaze, calm and unwavering. No groveling required, just respect. If that's too high a price for you, then yes, give it back. He hesitated, jaw working, but didn't let go of the check. Claudia, however, shoved hers across the table with a bitter laugh. Here, take it. I don't need your pity money. I have my own success. Her words rang hollow, but I accepted the envelope without a word, slipping it into my bag beside Margaret's. Daniel spoke then, his voice stronger than before. This is exactly what she's talking about. You can't even accept kindness without twisting it into something ugly. Emily isn't buying you, she's reminding you she exists, that she matters, and if you can't handle that, maybe we shouldn't be here at all. The room went still. Claudia's face flushed crimson. You'd leave? Over her? Daniel didn't hesitate. I should have left a long time ago, the first time you mocked her and I stayed silent. I won't make that mistake again. Margaret's hand gripped the edge of the table, her knuckles white. Daniel, don't you dare. But he cut her off. No, Mother, don't you dare. You've controlled this family for too long, making everyone dance to your tune. But Emily is my wife, my partner. If you can't respect her, then you don't respect me either. Grace's eyes shone with tears, pride written across her face. Finally, she whispered. I sat taller in my chair, my heart racing. But not from fear, from relief. For once, Daniel wasn't just holding my hand under the table. He was standing beside me. Out loud, in front of everyone. Ryan muttered. This is insane, but his voice lacked its usual bite. He clutched his envelope tightly, unwilling to let go, even as his mother and sister rejected theirs. I looked around the table, my voice calm. You all have a choice. Respect me, or don't. But if you don't, understand this. The checks go back in my bag, and so do I. I won't keep showing up to be treated like furniture. I won't sit in corners anymore, Claudia hissed. You'll regret this. I smiled faintly. No, Claudia. I regret staying silent for as long as I did. But I don't regret this. Margaret stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the polished floor. This family doesn't bend to ultimatums. Daniel rose too, his hand still clasping mine. Then maybe this family breaks. The silence that followed was thunderous. Ryan shifted in his seat, clearly torn between pride and greed. Grace reached for her envelope and held it to her chest. I'll keep mine, Emily. Not for the money, but for what it represents. I see you. I always have. And I respect you. Her words broke the tension, if only slightly. My throat tightened. Gratitude swelling in me. One by one, eyes turned back to Margaret. But for the first time, the matriarch of the Parker family had no words. She simply glared, her silence louder than any outburst. And as Daniel guided me to my feet, ready to walk out of that house if we had to, I realized the power had finally shifted. The corner wasn't mine anymore. It was theirs. Sometimes the loudest sound at a dinner table isn't laughter, it's the crack of a family breaking apart. Daniel's hand was warm and steady in mine as he pulled back his chair, ready to leave. For years I had dreamed of him standing beside me, and now, finally, he was. But as we rose, the room erupted. Ryan shot to his feet first, his voice raised. We're really going to let her hijack Christmas with her little stunt? Over some checks? Grace stood too, her voice firm. This isn't about the checks, Ryan. This is about years of disrespect finally being called out. Claudia sneered, her tone dripping venom. Oh, please. Emily's been playing the martyr since the day she married Daniel. Sitting quietly, pretending to be the victim. waiting for the perfect moment to make us all look bad. I turned slowly toward her, my voice calm. I didn't make you look bad, Claudia. You did that yourself every time you mocked me, every time you treated me like less. All I did tonight was give you a mirror. Her face reddened. You're twisting everything. Daniel's voice cut through, sharp and clear. No, Claudia. She's telling the truth. And deep down, you know it. Margaret slammed her hand on the table, the crystal glasses rattling. Enough! This family has survived wars, scandals, and setbacks. I will not let her tear us apart. I met her fiery gaze. I'm not tearing you apart, Margaret. I'm showing you the cracks that were already there. The room buzzed with tension. Ryan muttered, "This is insane," under his breath again, but louder this time. His face was pale, his arrogance faltering under the weight of the moment. Grace stepped forward, her voice calm but strong. For years, we've all seen how Emily's been treated. We've stayed quiet because it was easier. But tonight, silence isn't an option anymore. Claudia laughed bitterly. Of course you'd side with her. You've always been jealous of me, Grace. Grace's jaw tightened. Jealous? Ashamed, maybe. Ashamed of how you and your mother treat people you think are beneath you. Daniel's hand squeezed mine. We're done here, he said firmly. Margaret's face hardened, her voice trembling with rage. If you walk out that door, Daniel, don't bother coming back. This family doesn't need traitors. His jaw clenched, his eyes locked on hers. Then I guess you'll have to get used to fewer people at the table. Gasps rippled. Claudia clutched at her pearls. Ryan muttered a curse under his breath. Grace, bless her heart, lifted her chin. If Daniel and Emily go, I go too. I won't stay in a family where cruelty is tradition. Pamela, the cousin, who had sat quietly through most of the chaos, finally spoke up from the end of the table. I always thought the way you treated Emily was wrong. Tonight just proved it. Margaret's face drained of color, her grip on her wineglass tightening until I thought it might shatter. You would all betray me? For her? I straightened my shoulders. Not for me, Margaret. For what's right. Claudia slammed her envelope on the table again. This is madness. She's tearing the family apart. No. Grace shot back. You are. Because you'd rather cling to your pride than admit you were wrong. The room fractured in real time, voices raised, accusations flying, relatives choosing sides. Some muttered their support for Margaret, others nodded toward me, their eyes full of shame for years of silence. Through it all, I stood tall, Daniel's hand in mine. My heart raced. But it wasn't fear anymore. It was freedom. Finally, Daniel pulled me gently toward the door. We've said enough, he murmured. I turned back one last time, scanning the table. Claudia fuming, Ryan pale, Margaret trembling with rage. And Grace, standing tall, her eyes full of pride. Enjoy your dinner, I said softly. But remember, corners don't stay corners forever. Sometimes they become the center of the room. And with that, Daniel and I walked out, the door closing behind us with a finality that echoed louder than any slammed glass. What none of them realized then was that walking away wasn't the end, it was the beginning of a new balance in the Parker family, one they couldn't control. Leaving that night should have been the end of it, but families rarely let wounds close without reopening them. Daniel and I drove home in silence, the snow falling in soft waves across the windshield. His grip on the steering wheel was tight, his jaw set. But when we pulled into our driveway, he finally exhaled. I should have stood up sooner, he murmured, his voice low. All those years, I let them talk down to you, and I stayed quiet. Tonight, I saw what that silence did to you. Never again. Tears pricked my eyes, but they weren't sad ones. For the first time, I felt him fully on my side. I squeezed his hand. We did what we needed to. That's enough for me. But it wasn't the end. 2 days later, my phone buzzed nonstop. First Grace, checking in with words of support. Then Pamela, quietly admitting she wished she'd spoken up sooner. And then Margaret. Her message was short, clipped, and unmistakably commanding. Family meeting. Friday. Be there. Daniel frowned when I showed him. You don't have to go. I looked at him. Steady. No, I do. They need to hear me. Really hear me. And this time, I won't let them twist it. Friday evening, we walked back into the Parker estate. But this time, something was different. The grandeur was the same, the gleaming chandelier, the polished marble floor, but the energy was fractured. Claudia stood near the window, arms crossed and scowling. Ryan sat stiffly by the fireplace, his check still clutched like a lifeline. Grace greeted us warmly, but even she looked tense. Margaret stood at the head of the room, her pearls gleaming, her posture rigid. Daniel. Emily, she said, her voice clipped. Sit. We did, but this time, I didn't let them push me to the side. I sat squarely at the center of the sofa, Daniel beside me. Margaret's eyes narrowed. You embarrassed this family at Christmas dinner. You divided us. I met her gaze, calm. No, I exposed the division that was already there. The only thing I embarrassed was the way you've treated me, Claudia scoffed. Oh, here we go again, the endless victim speech. Before Daniel could bristle, I raised a hand. My voice was steady, but it carried through the room. You call it playing the victim. I call it telling the truth. For 15 years, I sat at that table and listened to you laugh at me, mock my clothes, dismiss my work, push me into corners like I didn't matter. And I stayed quiet because I thought silence was strength. But silence only made you bolder. It told you I would never fight back. Claudia opened her mouth, but I didn't let her. You say I embarrassed the family? What embarrassed this family was watching a group of grown adults humiliate someone who only ever tried to belong. What embarrassed this family was my husband's silence until he finally found his voice. What embarrassed this family was your greed, your arrogance, your pride. The room was still. Even Ryan looked uneasy. I pulled the remaining envelopes from my bag and set them on the coffee table. These were never about money. They were about showing you that the person you thought was invisible was standing right in front of you, stronger than you realized. And whether you accept that or not, I will not go back to being silent. Grace's voice trembled with emotion. Emily, that's the truth they've needed to hear for years. Ryan muttered. So what now? You want us to clap for you? Apologize? Pretend the past never happened? I looked at him evenly. No, I want honesty. If you can't treat me with respect, say so now and I'll walk away. Keep the money, tear it up, I don't care. But don't sit here and pretend anymore. Silence hung, thick and heavy. Claudia shifted uncomfortably. Ryan stared at the floor. Pamela whispered, She's right. Finally, Daniel spoke, his voice firm. This isn't just Emily's fight. It's mine too. And if you can't respect my wife, then you don't respect me. We won't keep coming back for more of the same. Margaret's face was pale, her mask cracking for the first time. Her voice wavered, just slightly. You've changed him, she said bitterly to me. I shook my head. No, I reminded him of his strength, the strength you buried under your control. Grace nodded fiercely, and that's what this family needs. Less control, more truth. The room fractured again, Margaret bristling, Claudia seething, Ryan silent, Pamela leaning toward me, Grace resolute. Once, I didn't care how they looked at me. I had said what I needed to say. And as I stood, gathering the envelopes and tucking them away, I knew one thing for certain. They could no longer pretend I was invisible, because I had made myself undeniable. I had been quiet for 15 years. But that night I realized silence was a prison and I was breaking free. The living room was silent except for the soft ticking of Margaret's grandfather clock. The envelopes sat on the table between us like a line drawn in the sand. I rose to my feet, my pulse steady, my voice clear. For too long I've let you define me. The quiet one. The one with no achievements worth mentioning. The one shoved into corners at dinners while you toasted each other's success. I wore that role because I thought enduring it meant I was keeping the peace. I looked directly at Margaret. But peace without respect isn't peace, it's surrender, and I will not surrender anymore. Claudia rolled her eyes, but her usual sharpness wasn't there. So what? You want us all to fall at your feet now? Beg for forgiveness? I shook my head. No, Claudia. I don't want groveling. I don't even want apologies. What I want is change. Real change. No more mocking, no more dismissing, no more pretending I'm invisible. Treat me with the respect you would give any human being. That's all I ask. Ryan leaned forward, his voice tense. And if we don't? I didn't blink. Then I walk away. Daniel and I both. And you'll never see us again. That's not a threat, it's a boundary. Gasps filled the room. Margaret's hand tightened on her pearl necklace, her eyes flashing. You'd tear this family apart? I stood taller. I didn't tear it apart. You did every time you chose cruelty over kindness, pride over love, control over family. All I've done is finally hold up a mirror. The room buzzed with tension, but I didn't stop. My voice rose. Not in anger, but in strength. You say I embarrassed you? No. You embarrassed yourselves. I spent 15 years building something beautiful while you convinced yourselves I was nothing. And tonight, the truth stood at this table and you couldn't handle it. That's not my shame. That's yours. Grace's eyes glistened with tears. She whispered. Yes. Yes. Emily. Daniel stood beside me now, his hand resting lightly on my shoulder, his voice steady. She's right. If you can't respect her, you don't respect me. And I won't subject my wife to this treatment anymore. We're a package deal. Accept us both, or lose us both. Pamela shifted uneasily, then spoke up. Emily, you've said what many of us were too afraid to. You've shown strength I wish I had years ago. Claudia slammed her glass down. This is absurd. All this drama over a seat at the table? Over a few snide comments? I turned to her, calm but unwavering. It wasn't about a seat. It was about what that seat symbolized. You pushed me into corners. Not because there wasn't space, but because you wanted to remind me I didn't belong. And every joke, every dismissal, every laugh at my expense was your way of keeping me small. But I am not small. Not anymore. Ryan muttered something under his breath, but his eyes wouldn't meet mine. Margaret, for once, looked uncertain. Her iron facade cracked by the weight of truth she couldn't control. Grace clasped her hands together, her voice ringing with clarity. Emily isn't asking for anything extraordinary. She's asking for the bare minimum respect. If you can't give her that, then maybe this family isn't worth what you think it is. The silence that followed was different this time. Not shocked, not defensive, heavy, contemplative. Even Claudia, fuming, didn't have another retort ready. I stepped forward, gathering the envelopes one by one. I'll hold on to these until you decide who you want to be. A family built on pride and cruelty, or one that finally chooses respect. But either way, I won't sit in corners anymore. Daniel took my hand. We've said enough. Together, we turned toward the door. Grace stood, moving to hug me tightly. No matter what happens, Emily, you've already won. You found your voice. I smiled through the lump in my throat. And I'll never lose it again. Margaret's voice called after us, trembling between fury and fear. If you walk out that door, don't expect this family to ever be the same. I paused, glancing back at her. Good. Because the way it was, that family was never whole. And with that, we walked out. For the first time in 15 years, I wasn't leaving in silence. I was leaving with power, dignity, and the knowledge that whether they changed or not, I would never shrink again. After you shatter the silence, the echoes don't stop, they ripple, changing everything in their path. The days after the family meeting were strangely quiet. For the first time in years, my phone didn't light up with perfunctory holiday messages from the Parkers, just silence. But then, Slowly, the cracks began to show. Grace was the first to call. Her voice was warm, steady, and filled with pride. Emily, you don't know what you did. You broke the cycle. They may not admit it yet, but you forced them to face themselves. Her support was a balm. We spoke for over an hour, laughing, even crying a little. For the first time in a long time, I felt seen not just by Grace, but by myself. 2 days later, Pamela sent a message. I've been thinking about what you said. You were right. I should have spoken up years ago. I'm sorry I didn't. I didn't need her apology, but it meant more than I expected. The cracks in Margaret's fortress were widening, but not everyone reacted with humility. Claudia posted a thinly veiled rant on social media about attention seekers who think money makes them powerful. Ryan liked the post, of course. They were clinging to their pride, unwilling to admit how much the truth had shaken them. Margaret, however, stayed silent. No calls, no messages, no summons. And somehow, that silence spoke louder than words. Daniel watched it all unfold, guilt written across his face. One evening, he finally spoke, his voice heavy. I let them do this to you for too long. I let me do this to you for too long. I thought keeping peace meant staying quiet. But peace without respect. You were right, it's just surrender. I reached for his hand, squeezing it gently. What matters is that you see it now. And that you're standing with me. He nodded, his eyes soft. Always. From now on, always. A week later, Grace invited us to dinner at her house. It was small, cozy, nothing like Margaret's grand estate. Pamela came too, bringing her kids. For the first time in years, I sat at a Parker family table and felt welcome. Grace raised her glass halfway through the meal. To Emily, she said, her voice firm. For finding her voice, and reminding us what family is supposed to mean. The others echoed, and my cheeks burned. But this time it wasn't from humiliation, it was from pride. Still, Margaret's shadow loomed. Grace admitted quietly that Margaret had been furious after we left. She ranted for hours about betrayal, about control slipping away. She told Claudia and Ryan that you'll ruin this family if they let you. But Emily, I think she's scared. Because for the first time, her power isn't absolute. That thought struck me. Margaret Parker, the iron matriarch who had held her children in her grip for decades, was rattled not because I had money, but because I had a voice, and that terrified her. One evening, as I sat reviewing orders for my business, my phone buzzed with a number I didn't recognize. Against my better judgment, I answered. It was Hannah, Claudia's teenage daughter. Her voice was soft, hesitant. Hi, Aunt Emily. I just wanted to say I'm sorry for how my mom treats you. I know it's wrong. And thank you for the check. It means I can start saving for college. My throat tightened, tears filling my eyes. Oh, sweetheart, you don't need to thank me. You deserve every opportunity, and I'm proud of you. Her voice wavered. I wish my mom could see what I see. After we hung up, I sat in silence for a long time, realizing the truth. Change had already begun. Not at the top, not with Margaret, but with the next generation, with those who were watching, learning. The Parkers' empire of pride was cracking, and the fractures were spreading. But Margaret wasn't finished. Not yet. A week later, an embossed envelope arrived in the mail. Inside was an invitation, another family meeting at her estate. No apology, no explanation. Just a demand. Daniel held the card between his fingers, his jaw tightening. We don't have to go. I studied it, feeling the weight of what it meant. We do, because this isn't over. Not until she finally hears me. And as I slipped the invitation back into its envelope, I knew this next confrontation would be the one that decided everything, whether the Parkers rebuilt as a family or collapsed under Margaret's pride. Some endings don't come with fireworks, they come with a quiet shift, the moment you realize you don't need their approval to stand tall. The Parker estate looked as imposing as ever when Daniel and I pulled up for what Margaret had grandly called a family meeting. The snow had melted since Christmas, but the cold clung to the air, sharp and biting. Inside, the atmosphere was tense. Margaret sat at the head of the grand living room like a queen on her throne. Claudia perched at her side, arms crossed and lips curled. Ryan lingered near the fireplace, restless, while Grace and Pamela sat together, their expressions steady but wary. Margaret's voice cut through the silence the moment we entered. "Emily, Daniel, sit." This time, I didn't take the far corner. I walked straight to the center sofa and sat, Daniel at my side. Grace's small, proud smile gave me strength. Margaret clasped her hands, her pearls glinting. "You've caused chaos in this family. Division. Accusations. And for what? To prove a point?" I met her gaze. Calm. "Not to prove a point. To claim my dignity. To show you I won't be treated like a shadow anymore." Claudia scoffed. Here we go again, the great Emily speech. I ignored her, keeping my eyes on Margaret. "You called this meeting, so tell me, Margaret, what do you want?" For the first time, hesitation flickered across her face. She leaned back, her voice brittle. "I want this family back. I want unity. And that won't happen if you keep forcing ultimatums." My chest tightened, but I didn't look away. Unity without respect isn't unity, it's control, and I won't live under control anymore. The silence that followed was heavy. Ryan shifted uncomfortably. Pamela murmured softly, "She's right." Claudia's voice rose, sharp and venomous. "You think you're so righteous, but you've torn us apart. And for what? Money?" I turned to her, my voice firm but even. "It was never about money. It was about the way you laughed when I tried to speak. The way you pushed me into corners so I'd disappear. The way you made me feel like I was less, year after year. Money was only the mirror. And you didn't like what you saw." Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. Daniel's voice rang steady beside me. "Emily isn't the one tearing this family apart. Mother, Claudia, you are. Your pride, your cruelty, your refusal to see her worth. If you can't change, then we're done here." Margaret's face paled. Her hands trembled slightly, though her voice still carried steel. "You'd walk away from your own mother?" Daniel didn't hesitate. "I'd walk away from anyone who disrespects my wife." The room went silent again. Even Claudia seemed struck by the conviction in his voice. Grace leaned forward, her eyes locked on Margaret. "You asked what you wanted, Margaret. But the question isn't what you want, it's what you're willing to lose. Because Emily's not going back into the corner. She's standing in the light now, and you can either stand with her or watch her walk away." Pamela nodded softly. "And if she walks, she won't walk alone." Ryan rubbed his temples, muttering, "This is insane." But even he looked rattled, as if he was beginning to see the truth he'd tried to deny. Margaret's breath hitched. For the first time, her mask slipped, and beneath it, I saw not anger, but fear. Fear of losing control, fear of losing her son. Her voice cracked. "I don't know how to do this. To let go." I softened but didn't waver. "Then start small. Treat me with the same respect you'd give a stranger on the street. That's all I've ever wanted. Not your praise, not your approval, just dignity." The silence that followed stretched long. Claudia glared. Ryan shifted. "But Margaret?" Margaret lowered her eyes. She didn't apologize, not fully, but her silence spoke volumes. The fortress had cracked. Daniel stood, extending his hand to me. I rose, looking around the room one last time. Grace's proud smile. Pamela's quiet nod. Claudia's scowl. Ryan's unease. And Margaret, smaller now, no longer towering. I gathered the remaining envelopes from the table and tucked them into my bag. "When you're ready to treat me with respect, you'll see me again. Until then, goodbye." We turned toward the door. Grace standing to hug me tightly. "You've already won, Emily. Don't forget that." Tears pricked my eyes, but I smiled. "I won't." As Daniel and I walked out of the Parker estate, the air felt lighter, the cold crisp and freeing. For the first time in 15 years, I wasn't leaving as the woman shoved into corners. I was leaving as myself whole, strong, undeniable. My name is Emily Parker, I'm 39 years old, and the Christmas they forced me into the corner became the night I stood at the head of the table and never looked back.